I've had a Red Sea ATO Plus on my main tank for a little under 18 months now, and I had one on my previous tank for about 6 months before that. So today I'm going to share with you my long-term thoughts. Now, because this ATO has been out for a while, there are loads of videos out there that cover the technical specifications and all of its features, so I won't go over all of that stuff in mega detail, and instead I'll tell you about the stuff that I've actually found really useful in the long run. Before I get into that though, there is of course the usual disclaimer. I bought the first Red Sea ATO with my own money, but my current one was given to me by Red Sea with the tank. Red Sea didn't actually ask me to review it, and in any event I am of course always free to say whatever I want, both good and bad. The first thing I need to tell you about is of course how this functions as an auto top-off, and quite simply for me it has been absolutely brilliant. I've had ATOs in the past from Tunsey, Refloat and DD, and I had intermittent issues with all of them every now and then. The first generation Tunsey osmonator had a rock solid reputation for reliability, but I didn't always have that experience myself, and more often than I would expect, I'd open my sump door to find that the water level had dropped, but the Tunsey sensor hadn't registered that and so wasn't topping off the water. However, I've had no such problems with the Red Sea ATO over a combined period of 2 years. It uses titanium sensors to monitor the water level, rather than the traditional optical sensors and float valves that the other ATO systems use. Now, I did wonder how titanium sensors would fare, given that this is a new technology to the hobby and so not tried and trusted, but I needn't have been concerned, and the Red Sea sensor has been absolutely flawless. It's never once failed to detect the water level, and I find the sensor to be more precise than the Gen 1 Tunsey sensor was. And by that, what I mean is that it consistently adds the exact amount of water it needs to, whereas my Tunsey would often keep going after the water had got back to the correct level, which I always found really annoying. However, one person's experience doesn't tell the whole story, so I did a bit of Googling before I made this video to see if other people have had problems. Now, it's hard to glean much from that because this ATO comes with literally every Red Sea tank that goes on sale now, so there have been thousands of these out in the wild, but for what it's worth, I did find a couple of instances where people had problems with the sensors. As far as I can tell, they seem to be fairly isolated incidents, but it sounds like the sensor will need a quick clean every now and then to keep it running properly, so it's probably worth adding that to your twice a year maintenance list. But ultimately, my main takeaway from the research I did was I didn't see a ton of failures that would give me cause for concern, but if you have one and you've had a problem, share it in the comment section below. Now, no matter how reliable an auto top-off is, it is always good to have built-in redundancy features in case the primary sensor fails. The Red Sea ATO has 2 such redundancy features. The first is an additional pair of sensors about an inch above the main level sensors, which will cut the pump if the primary sensor fails. And it also calculates the average pump runtime, and it will shut off the pump automatically if it runs for too long, which again should prevent overflowing. Now, I'm glad it has those features, but I've never actually had them kick in because the primary sensor has just worked perfectly for me every single time for the full 2 years I've had them. And for what it's worth, it also has a pump protection feature whereby it will turn the pump off and send you a notification if your freshwater reservoir runs dry. But I actually don't like that feature because it depends on you to update the app every time you fill up the freshwater reservoir, which I can't be bothered to do. And if you don't update it, it'll think the reservoir is empty when it's actually full, and it'll turn off the ATO to protect the pump. Now, it does send you a notification when it does that, so you can just open up the app and turn it back on, but all of that just creates unnecessary admin for me, so I've actually disabled it, and I just fill up the freshwater reservoir every week like I've always done, which means it's never going to run out. Now, before I tell you the one big thing I don't like, there are a couple of other features that are worth mentioning. First up is the app, which on the face of it is pretty unnecessary for an auto top-off, but which does actually have some useful features. Firstly, you can use it to turn the ATO off, which I do when I carry out a water change, because I always start draining my water out of the tank with the return pump on. So if I don't turn the ATO off, it'll just start to replace the salt water that I'm removing with fresh water, which of course I don't want. Now, with previous ATOs, I've just turned it off at the plug, which of course does the same job, but I have the app set up on my Red Sea app to turn my Red Sea return pump off at the same time, which is really useful during water changes. And if you have a Red Sea skimmer and the Red Sea wave makers as well, you can set the app to turn those off at the same time too. The app also keeps a log of the amount of water it dispenses every day. Now that's not something I look at regularly, but because I dose Kalkwasser, it is actually quite useful to see the average amount of fresh water my ATO adds to the tank each day. And if you don't know why that's good to know when you're dosing Kalkwasser, I'll link a video at the top corner of the screen explaining how Kalkwasser works. In terms of accuracy, the top-off log was actually pretty poor at first, and it was only when I calibrated it manually that it started reading more accurately. And even then, I only use it as a rough guide, to be fair, rather than an exact figure. And to be honest, it is a bit of a gimmick, because if you know the size of your ATO container, you can then just fill it up, measure how much water is left after a week, and work out the daily average that way. The temperature sensor though is a little bit more useful, at least for me. Now I have a heating controller on my tank, but it's not Wi-Fi, so it doesn't notify me if the temperature drops or spikes when I'm not at home. The Red Sea ATO is Wi-Fi though, and that means that I can check my temperature when I'm away from home, which I have done a couple of times, particularly in the summer, to make sure that my cooling fans are working properly. And usefully, it also sends you a notification if your temperature goes outside of your desired range, so if your heater fails, for example, you will know about it pretty much straight away. It also has a leak detector, which fortunately for me I haven't needed, but again that's a feature that will tell you if there's a problem with your tank that needs your attention. Now there is one more thing I like about the hardware, and that is the water dispensing outlet. Niche compliment, I know. Now that actually directs the water against the inside of your sump though, which means that it makes a gentler trickling sound instead of the louder splashing sound that some other ATOs make. And now I find that reassuring, because then I hear my auto top off dispensing water throughout the day, and that gives me daily reassurance that it's working, which is actually quite important because things can go south very quickly in a reef tank if your auto top off fails. However, it's annoying to have an ATO that makes too much noise, so the gentle trickle for me is the perfect solution. However, that does segue into the main downside, which is the pump. While I found it to be completely reliable in the 2 years I've had it, I do find it a bit noisy. It only runs for a few seconds at a time, but it makes an annoying buzzing sound that I associate with older AC water pumps, despite it being a DC pump. And it took me a little bit of work to get it quiet enough to even live with. Because my freshwater reservoir sits outside of my cabinet, I don't get the noise suppression that you get from having it inside your cabinet, and because my container is actually made of glass, it amplifies any vibrations and effectively becomes one big speaker. To make it quieter then, I put a lid on the container, wrapped the pump in a vibration absorbing silicone tubing, suspended the pump off the bottom of the container so it didn't vibrate against the glass, and finally I installed an anti-vibration mat underneath the freshwater reservoir to again reduce any vibration noise. Before I did that, I could hear it upstairs, which was really annoying when I was trying to get to sleep, and if I hadn't been able to make it quieter, the noise level actually might have been a deal breaker for me. It's now quiet enough that it doesn't bother me anymore, but I really would like Red Sea to improve on that for the next generation of their auto top-off. The last thing I need to tell you about is the price. At £185 or £215 if you need the mounting magnets, it is quite expensive, and there are many ATOs that are available much cheaper than that. However, the Tunzi Osmolator 3 is the closest rival, so that's what I'm going to compare it to. The Tunzi is priced at £180, so it's a little bit cheaper, and while I haven't tried the latest gen Tunzi, I have tried the new Tunzi pump with my old Tunzi ATO, and it's noticeably quieter than the Red Sea pump, so it definitely wins on noise levels. However, it doesn't have any of the smart features that the Red Sea ATO has, so you'll need to decide what's most important to you. Ultimately though, I'm really happy with the Red Sea ATO, and this is the ATO that I would buy if I set up a new tank. It has loads of bonus features which are nice to have, but the best thing about it is that it has been more precise and reliable than any ATO I've ever owned. All I really want from an ATO is for it to work 100% of the time with no intervention from me whatsoever, and that is exactly what the Red Sea ATO Plus does. Now, I don't do enough long-term reviews here on the channel, so I'm planning to do more in the coming months, so make sure you like and subscribe for that. And if I've missed anything, or if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, happy reefing. I think he's going to move when I start talking, but we'll see. If not, we've got a prop.